From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. This week on the show, we welcome a familiar face. Actually, we welcome a new face back to the Nashville media scene, but actually it's sort of a familiar face. He's Steve Cavendish, the editor of the Nashville Scene. Steve was previously the editor of the old Nashville City paper before leaving to go to our nation's capital early in 2015, where he was the editor of the Washington City paper. Steve, welcome back to town, and thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Now, you grew up here in Nashville. You went to college at Belmont. You worked back in the day for the Banner and the afternoon newspaper. You've known Nashville. You spent about a year away. When you came back, I was talking about this rapid change going on in Nashville. Did it feel different? Did it look different when you came back? What was it like to come back from Washington to here, having grown up here?
Well, it's interesting. Over the last year, about the only thing you notice is the cranes. That's different. I was here for 4 years before that, but it was interesting. I worked all over the country, and we would come back because we both have family here. We both grew up here, and my wife and I would say, "Oh, did you notice that building? Oh, did you notice that building? Oh, that's not a park anymore, or that's not green space anymore. Oh, those are tall, skinny houses everywhere." So yeah, Nashville's changed a lot, and we've been watching it.
Now, I hear some Nashville natives and longtime residents sort of bemoaning that somehow the city is losing its soul. Do you buy into any of that?
Not really. I mean, the people tend to say that when there's lots of change going on, and if you look at any major city in the South and compare it to Nashville, few have grown as fast. Few have had sort of the population boom that Nashville's had. So you're going to feel those sort of things if you're a longtime resident here. But I think the city's soul's pretty well intact, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to be back here, is because we love the way it feels. We love the people. We love just kind of everything about the city. And it's really similar to the place we grew up in. Now it's a lot bigger.
Now, when you left here in 2015, the mayor's race in Nashville was just beginning to come together. Did you watch it from afar up in D.C.?
Very intently. It was a fun race to watch.
Surprised we had 7 well-financed candidates?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an indication of Nashville is everybody wants to be part of success. And I think you had a lot of people that wanted to run a big, successful city. And so you had a lot of good candidates and a lot of really well-financed candidates.
Now, were you surprised that the race turned out as it did, that Nashville was ready to break what would be the ultimate political glass ceiling in this town, and that would be electing a woman to be mayor?
Not necessarily. I mean, Megan Barry was a really good candidate and had a lot of grassroots support. And I think if anything, if you look at Nashville politics over the last 3-4 years, people that can build grassroots support have a chance, whether it's in the school board, whether it's in a council race, whether it's in the mayor's race. And you can overcome certain things. Like, for instance, I mean, Barry never had the same financial advantages that other candidates did, but had a really strong volunteer base that was going to go pound doors for her, and there's no substitute for being able to go door to door and have people sell your message that believe in it.
Now, last year, for one of the first times, we saw the emergence in a local race of dark money, an outside group coming in a super PAC, although it actually had a lot of local funding that tried to impact that. We saw that in the August 4th elections here in this summer with the school board races. Are these kinds of dark money outside groups just going to be a part of politics, period? I
think so. I mean, until we change the regulations on it, and until something happens until there's a challenge to the Citizens United ruling, I think we're kind of stuck with it, which stinks if take a look at the school board, for example. In this race, you had an independent expenditure committee from Stand for Children dump $230,000 into 4 different school board races in the month of July alone.
And $700,000 statewide in legislative races.
Right, and that's that doesn't even include money that was spent before this disclosure period, and we'll see what happens when the October disclosures come out, because I'm pretty sure that they spent money between the end of July and Election Day. So that's money that is unaccountable. And that's a big problem. That's a huge problem. When you can target races with more money than the candidates have the ability to raise themselves, I think it has some scary implications for how candidates are elected, but also I think it has the potential to change the dynamics of a school board after after election day.
A lot of the money that a lot of the candidates that the dark money supported wound up losing their races. So is that a sign that the voters saw through this, or was it a sign that perhaps the candidates they were supporting weren't necessarily good enough to win those races?
Well, I don't know that they necessarily waged a very effective campaign. The Stand for Children folks did. If you look at the money that they spent,
filled up your mailbox.
They filled up your mailbox, but there's a problem with that, and direct mail has limits, and I think we found exactly what the limits of it are this time, that you can only hammer the exact same message against candidates again and again and again in someone's mailbox before it either turns it against that message or they tune out to it. And some of it, I mean, I had one political consultant describe what Stan was doing as malpractice, because you had multiple mailers landing in people's mailboxes, 2 or 3 at a time in the run up to election day. That's oversaturation. It's just not going to work.
Now, you wrote an article in The Scene that after the election that said you really find a way to ban this money in local races, but as you just mentioned, that really isn't possible. And even if the court decides to change its mind, where's the line between money is not speech and what free speech is and what you need to do in terms of money? Because the court says money is speech, and the more money you got, the more speech you got.
Right. But I also think that we need to get to a place where there's disclosure. So, for instance, Stand for Children is a great example here, because they have a PAC here in Tennessee where they were acting like a legitimate PAC does. There were limits to what they could do, and there was also disclosure of...
And you knew where the money came from.
And you knew where the money came from. So I could say, oh, this person's donating to this PAC, and I could see it, and I could see kind of where the influence was. But they haven't, because of the Citizens United ruling, they have a 501c4 social welfare organization based out of Oregon that was literally sending checks in the amount of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 every few days, funneling operations into this independent expenditure committee that was separate from the PAC. And so what we're left with is an organization in Tennessee and an organization in Denver, the person that was running the independent expenditure committee, all have the same national leaders, and we have to believe that these two people don't talk to each other even though they have the exact same interests and the exact same leadership and the exact same name. I mean, that's the problem of the system, and it just doesn't pass the smell test.
Steve Cavendish is our guest. He's the editor of the Nashville Scene. We're talking local politics. We'll talk a little bit about the media as well. After this break, stay with us on Inside Politics.